Okay, and we are live finally on Twitch and YouTube, and here with some good friends on Discord who'll be sticking around for the beginning of this. So thank you for joining today. We've got Slink, Killen, good friend Schmo. So today we're going to be taking a look at 3 different topics, and I'm actually experimenting with using a webcam on my Twitch stream if you want to take a look, no problem. But today's topic is principally about using Python, which is a beginner introduction, to set render settings on all of your scenes. We're also going to be taking a look at some artificial intelligence, or in other words, machine learned topics or tools to help us out. And we're also going to be using a technique called, which I would call custom lighting per shot. Basically, it's a technique of using collections and lighting your shots per shot. So you have a global lighting and then you have a per shot lighting, and then set that up to render. So we've got a lot to cover, a lot of things to take a look at, and if you're watching back at this, I hope you find this useful. And I also want to say thanks for returning after last week's cancellation and postponement. December's usually very difficult for me with work, because I currently have 2 jobs and I'm trying to deliver everything, and then I have the social aspect of everything about Christmas, the holidays, everybody else's holidays, and all of the social events of the end of the year. So there's a lot happening, and with that I'm trying to push through. So bear with me as I continue to hopefully share things from my workflow for you. If you have any questions, if you have any insights or anything for the future or at the moment, I'll be keeping an eye on my Twitch chat and on the Discord chat, and hopefully I can answer any of your doubts. So without further ado, let's begin. So my first question for the day that we're going to take a look at is about automation. So let's load up the latest build of B4Artist. Oh, side note, Blender 3.4 and Blender 3.3.2 LTS has been released, which means there's a lot of updates that have come to the Blender world. I'm currently using 3.5, but 3.4 is now official, and B4Artist 3.4 will soon be official as soon as I finish compiling the Windows build and installer. We already have the Linux builds ready, the Mac build is on its way, and then we have the Windows builds coming up soon. So let's take a closer look. Here's the release build. We already have a new splash screen as well. So let me just load that up. And here we go. So first things first, I wanted to talk to you about automation. So lately, if you have been paying attention to the Discord discussions and the Twitter discussions and around the internet, a lot of artists have been in a large debate about artificial intelligence. And this past week, ChatGPT dropped their 3rd version, and there's a possibility of another version coming out soon, which is basically an advanced chat bot. So the difference with this chatbot compared to other chatbots is that it has been trained on a snapshot of the internet from 2021, and it can recall a conversation and lead you through it. So you could have a debate, you could have do some research, have something explain something it has already talked about in depth, and some of the data that it has processed is GPL code, including Blender add-on code. So we now have a conversational assistant that we can use for free right at the moment, since it's in beta, to help us code our add-ons without needing to learn everything. So I'm going to just quickly do that and explain the code that I'll be working with today for one reason: automation. So the big debate on the internet is about artificial intelligence, and unfortunately we are still probably between 1 and 5 centuries away from a general artificial intelligence, mainly because we don't have the technology for it yet, and the mathematics to actually create it still doesn't exist. what we call artificial intelligence today is basically machine learned neural network algorithms, which is basically a very advanced, statistically based if-else. So if it does this, do this. If not, do this. If not, do this. In a very advanced, trained way to using statistics. But this still gives us a lot of power, because with the internet, we have a lot of data that we can use to train a very statistically complex if-else piece of code. And with that, here is B4Artist 3.4.0. Currently built on 3.50 alpha, which is only a couple weeks off the code from 3.4. It has everything from 3.4 plus a few extra goodies. And we've used the splash screen, which was showcased in the Blender Artists forum and also on Blender Nation, which was a piece I created. I was very honored to have it showed there a little bit, one of my first. And so we made it the splash screen, which is part of the Painterly project from episode 3 of the Android Repair Workshop. So let's take a look at what we're going to do. So if I load up, if we go into my scene view, basically what we're going to do is this with the code. Automation with artificial intelligence or with code, anything, is basically taking something that would be repetitive and making it easier. So for example, or taking something that requires a lot of work and doing it in a faster way through the computer. So what we're going to do is, for example, here in this scene, I have, this is the scene file inside of Blender. And in the scene file, I may have a number of shots. So this shot may have shot 1 all the way to shot 10. And all of these are divided into scenes. So each scene is like a render settings. So this one could have some render settings. It could be with Eevee. It could have some samples. It could have some shadow settings, some refraction settings. It could have a number of different settings. And each one of these scenes, each one of these shots is part of the same story, right? So when I'm working with my color and working with my renders, I want all of my scenes to have the same render settings. So let's imagine this short story with 10 shots. If I want to change the shadow settings of each one of my scenes, I'll have to do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times per scene. So I have 2048 samples on my cascade shadows, and I need to change it to 1048 to save half of the render time. And so I have to load scene 1, change it, load scene 2, change it, load scene 3, change it, load scene 4, change it. It gets very tiring and very boring. And so what we're going to do is we're going to need to learn how to use automation to make this run faster. So this is a beginner course on Python. You don't need to understand Python to use it. It's basically a copy and paste thing, or we can talk with the virtual assistant to get the job done. And we'll see how it works. So are you ready? So let's just prepare our scene. We're going to pretend this cube is like a floor, like this, a 2-meter floor. And maybe I'll make like a wall over here. Just a quick little scene like this. And then we're going to add in an icosphere. And he's going to be the body of our Suzanne character, which is kind of fun. So here's the monkey. Monkey's on his body like this. And he's ready to be filmed. So we're just throwing the camera, take a closer look. Just check and see if the scene is good. There we go. So here he is. He's all happy and hunky-dory. Let's maybe throw on some colors nice and quickly. So one thing that comes with B4Artist 3.4 is that we have a default library that loads up by default. So you can throw in lights, use your materials, and different things like this. So for example, we can give him a ceramic body here that's green. and we'll give him like this clay medium on the head up here at the top, and should be compiling. But we have all these quite an extensive material library for free that you can use. So what other material we can give, like a ceramic, there we go, there he is. Maybe we'll give like this, let's get some paint, some yellow paint in the background. And a matte yellow paint for the floor. There, nice and simple. So we got this little basic scene with some preset lights that I added, and we need to start setting up the cameras. So the first camera is a general shot, like this. And we're going to call this shot 1, SO1. There, I usually say P for me, plane 1. So this is my first scene, and what I want to do now is I want to duplicate it, make a linked copy. So I'm just going to make 3 linked copies. Keep it nice and simple. So shot 1, 2, and 3. So shot 1 is like this. I also need to make sure my cameras are, I have 3 different cameras. So I have camera 1, I have camera 2, and I have camera 3. So in scene 1, I've got camera 1. In scene 2, I've got camera 2. So let's just move my camera around. So he's like nice and close up to the face, looking into his eyes, and he's like, I'm feeling curious about my life. So shot 3, and maybe we can take a look at where is he sitting. So we have a side shot where he's just sitting here like this. So shot 1, general shot, let's make it more in the same angle. Shot 2, close up. Shot 3, medium shot. 1, 2, 3. Good. So now we have these 3 shots, but if we take a look at the render settings, so if we take a look at the render settings here, we got 30 frames per second, that's all good. We're looking at the render settings up here, the top right corner, top left, sorry. I want to turn on the bloom. So typically, what I was explaining earlier, with each scene having its own render settings, I would have to click on bloom, change the scene, click on bloom, change the scene, click on bloom. How boring. So this is the part where we can use automation. And also want to say hello Gladnux and Decamp, thanks for connecting. My screen is so thick, yeah, you're right. And also nice rules of thirds for my framing, you're welcome. Yes, this is my face, I do wear glasses and have long hair. So okay, so let's figure this out. So let's go into the scripting layout, which is over here. Basically, we just have a script editor. We have the info editor, which is a console. So we have the Python console, the text editor, and the info editor. Those are the 3 basic things that we need. And we need to start working. So you think, okay, I don't know anything about Python. So to do automation inside of Blender, you can also automate inside of Blender using other automation tools. So let's take a look at chat.openai.com. So this is a artificial assistant, which is basically trained on a snapshot of the internet, but for code it is very useful. And it understands conversation. They've left it for free, and in 5 days they registered more than 1 million users, which took Netflix more than 45 months or so. It took a lot of other services many months to get to 1 million users. So 5 days, 1 million. This could be the future of a social network. And so with that, let's ask it a question. So I'm going to say, hello. How do I apply render settings to all of my scenes with Python in Blender? Simple question, and we'll take a closer look. It says, to apply render settings to all of your scenes in Blender using Python, you can use the BPY context screen.scene. property to access the current scene, and then use the BPY context scene.render property to access the render settings for the scene. You can use the various attributes of the render settings class to set the desired render settings, such as the resolution, frame rate, output, and format. And then he gives us an example to output the format to JPEG. So it says import BPY, which is important to run all of the Blender code. Then we need to set the resolution. So he's using bpy.context.scene.render.resolution _x should be 1920. And then he sets the output format to JPEG. And it's done. So this is the basis. But we have a problem though. Let's load up one of my render settings that I have. So this works with one scene. I mentioned that he worked on if we look here closer, and let me zoom in, he's using the current scene, the scene render. So in this case, it uses the active scene, which is the current scene I'm using, and then updates. So I need to do this to all of them. Okay, so I'm going to continue asking him another question. So, okay, great, thanks. How would I loop this on all of the scenes in a blend file? How, not would, but could. How could I loop this on all of the scenes in a Blender file? But let's copy this code and see if it actually works. So if we're inside here, we're going to create a new document. And inside the document, if you want to save it for later, just write in .py and you can export it to any other format. So we have import BPY, set the scene render to this, and then we want the JPEG format. We take a look at the render settings here. Right now it's on PNG. So let's hit run, pop. This is an old operation, so this is old code that doesn't work. Attribute scenes. So this little icon up here, run in console, is an actual add-on or from another area. So typically you would need to go to Window, toggle the system console, and when you're inside the console, you can actually see what's happening inside your script. You can use this little add-on, run in console, to run the script inside of the actual info editor, which I find a lot more comfortable because it has colors. So I just commented out that piece, hit this, it ran the text in 0.074 milliseconds, and the file is on JPEG. Marvelous. But did it do it on all of our scenes? It did not. It only did it to the selected scene. So let's go back to our assistant. It's still thinking. So the problem with having 1 million new users inside of this system, someone did a calculation on Twitter and they're using a lot of GPU power for free. But I'm talking of a lot of GPU power. So you're looking at, they have graphics cards with 80 gigs of RAM, and they have these in the hundreds, and they're using practically an array of supercomputer GPUs to calculate all of this and run it for everybody. So they're a bit overwhelmed, so this can't be trustworthy. So this is where we talk about machine learning and the future. Requires hardware and requires human interfacing. It's a dance. This is a co-production, and this is a codependence. So this is an assistant that in the future hopefully will replace searches and many other things in the future, or help assist searches in the future. But sometimes we need to do it ourselves. So I'm going to load a script which I have prepared for you, which is going to teach you how to isolate a scene and how to loop it. Because Blender only works typically of running an operator on the active thing, the active scene, the active object, the active selected item. It doesn't run operations on everything all the time unless you hold down Alt. The same is true with its Python API. So let's learn how to do it on all of the active scenes. So if we go into my library, go inside my scripts, going to click on my setups, and I'm going to go into my render settings, script that I've saved for later. I'll upload this later. So let's take a closer look at this script here, and I'll make it full screen. Whoops. So this script here, if you take a closer look, I import the BPY, and I have this command called for, so let's just say for the loop. So for the loop, inside of this data, if you remember the computer render settings up here, text BPY, bpy.context.scenes.render, so all the bpy.context.scene, this is the scene data. If we take a closer look here, this is how we access everything inside Blender. We write down BPY, and then we write down the context, which is the information that we need. Then we can, which is everything, selected objects, selected everything that we want. So you can write down scene, and then you can choose which scene you want. So if we take a closer look, so the scene properties of any kind, or scene, and then we can find the scene properties of that particular operation, like the scene name, the keying sets, everything inside Blender, the frame, whatever we need, but we don't need to be overwhelmed. So let's go back to our render settings. So what I'm doing is for the loop inside of the scene data. So we have context, which is generally the information that exists, and data is the information we want to get. So, or that's established, the established data. So instead of context, we're going to write down data. That's the big difference. But data and context are the two big ones. So data, scenes, and if we write control space, this will give us a list of existing data. So we have the library scene, P1, P2, P3. Great. That's all we needed. So here, it's going to say, for this loop, inside of this information, this data information, run these things. So in the loop, whenever it says X, we can write the loop, start frame, end frame. We could also write the file path, and we have everything that we could ever want. And at the end of it, semicolon, enter, add a tab space, and then from here, let's change your render setting. So for example, we wanted to use bloom. So let's go like this. Let's turn on bloom. So here we're going to copy, paste, and let me just delete everything just to make it nice and clear so it's not overwhelmed. So tab, paste, and notice this here that says context. So here's the data, and here's the context. So now we want to set the data. So we're going to get the data, and then we want to set the data. And to do that, we need to set it in the loop. So we get all of this here, and we replace the context with the loop. And we're going to use bloom true. And then I'm going to add in the strength, the intensity, to 2. So if I'm in my view settings, which is super strong and obvious, so that's the one we want, the super strong and obvious bloom, which is the value of 2. You can see that inside the info editor, it's writing down what we just did. So we can copy this with the mouse over it, copy, Control C, and we can enter, paste, replace this with the loop, and now for all of like just this part here, we'll just ignore for now. So if I hit run, I also added another loop that says for everything inside of this print the loop, settings apply to scenes, to all scenes. So if we take a look here on the left and up here on the top right, let's hit run. Boom. There's one issue. Oh, this is this code here, which we don't need. Let's just delete it for now. So let's hit run. So in all the scenes says this scene structure, which is the internal data, setting apply to all scenes. to this one, to this one, to this one. P1, P2, P3, and library. If we take a look at the settings, bloom at 2. Shot 2, bloom with bloom at 2. Shot 1, bloom with bloom at 2. Beautiful. So with one click, we set the settings for all of the scenes. So let's do something else. Let's go into the file format, click on options, color management, and we want to set it to, well, let's go to color management here. We want to set it to standard. So here we take a look at the view settings, transform. So we could do the same here. Replace the context with loop, and then just hit run, pop. And now if we switch the scenes, all of the colors are now set to standard, as you can see here. So this is one quick way to, for example, set up your rendering that you need. Another thing you can do with this is, for example, I want to render to an FFmpeg for preview purposes. So here's the format, change it to FFmpeg, and I want the settings to be H.264. So in this case, I'll switch it to MP4. So copy, paste it. I want to switch the quality to medium quality. Yep, copy paste that. And I want to set the, I want to have it with audio. So I want to set it to audio. So it renders the audio of the animatic. You need to be careful when you're copying and pasting. There we go. So now I have this settings. Remember that I need to replace this. So copy this in the side panel. I can find and replace. So let's replace it with the word loop. So find the next one. Replace, 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 replace. And now when I hit play, I go to all of my scenes, all of my render settings for this particular video or render is set to FFmpeg so that I'm ready to render all of the animatics that I need. And this is very handy because I could do it manually for all of my shots, or I could do it all of them at once with just a little bit of code, this for loop in. So now here's another thing. In my library, I'm changing the settings as well. Next question for you. How? Hello, Decap. How do I filter the rule of thirds in the chat on Twitch? You can tell an artist it's as if the rule of thirds is made by accident. Yeah, it's basically magic. I guess, I mean, there we go. Where's the camera? Here it is. I have to work on the zoom. I mean, this is probably too much bloom, right? So I need to think of that for later. So in the bloom settings, I could drop it down to 1, run again, and it's back to 1. Or I can drop it down to 0.5 or 4 and run again. There we go, it's a bit more realistic. That's crazy. So it's nice and quick. I have all these scenes. So what happens if I want to filter the scene? So this is where I'm going to teach you how to use a establish of a parameter. So this is quite an extensive one, but basically what I want to do is, this is a script to run all of the scenes to set up the render settings. Great. So I'm going to create this filter, and then I'm going to use the equal sign. Then I'm going to have an open bracket. So inside the open bracket, notice that I'm using a for and in. I'm using a loop. So I'm using the loop of the data scenes, but I'm adding the conditional if the scene name starts with P. So the scene is established that it's a data scene. So I'm recalling the scene that I have in the loop. So the scene is for the filter scene. Name starts with P. So the scene name starts with P. means I can use the string, which is inside this parenthesis, to say, okay, let's start with P. So all of the scenes that start with P will have its scene, the settings changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the bloom, false. Okay. And I'm going to do it for all of them in the filter. So in this case, instead of using all of the data of the scenes, I'm going to use the filter. So let's replace that with the filter. So this is no longer important, but let me just store it for later. And I will just write the filter. So for the loop inside of the filter, run these operators with the loop. So let's hit run. And it did it only to the scene that started with P1, P2, and P3. But library still has the bloom turned on. So this has the bloom off, off, off. This one is turned on. So this is a way that I can create a filter using this little piece of code. Let's see if ChatGPT has answered his question. He hasn't, so that's unfortunate. Hopefully in the future it becomes more of a faster service, but the GPU power that they need to run this is absolutely astronomical. So we gotta keep that in mind, have a little bit of patience, but the future is very bright. Or you could just use simple searching. And it's usually a longer route. But this is basically what we needed to learn. So if we take a look at our notes, we're using Python in a beginner way to set and render settings. The things that we had a look at is we used the bpy.data.scenes to get information. So this information, this gets the scene information that exists, right? We also learned a simple loop. So for the loop in the context, in the data that exists, right? So for the loop in the data that exists, let me just make this actually probably readable for the actual Python instead of using a string, colon, and then we have the loop, then dot, then we have the operator, pretty much. Then we also learned that you can do whatever you want inside the interface, and with that using then look in the info editor and then copy and paste, and then replace the context to the loop, right? This is how we copy what we want to change. And then from there, you can run. We also had a look at some filter code. So the filter code is basically a tiny piece of code where you establish a parameter. You can use any type of string Python that you want within the scene name. And if your names are correct, then you can use the names of the scenes to help you run particular settings on particular scenes based on particular tags inside of the name of the scene, which is kind of nice. And another thing as well is you could write loop.name. So this print basically is just, let's see if it works. Yeah, P1 settings applied. So you can use your filters to kind of print, instead of printing the actual like code, you can print just the name. And there are different things you can do like that. So let's go back. So you run in the console to see, or you can use the add-on. Let me just recall the add-on. I think it's called running console. Yes. This add-on is done by Kale, and you can download it for free from GitHub, and it's just called running console. Search for Blender add-on run in console. It's very nice. I love it. Super nice. And then you can see the actual results here in the editor. The other thing that I recommend from there is to create a filter is you set a parameter. And to do that, we use a filter, for example. The word filter is the same as this for in. So the scene for the scene inside this data scene's if. So this here is established that this, so everything in this data is this. So if this has the name this, then create the array. So this particular bracket means an array. It's a list of things. Imagine like a box. You throw in the red apples inside the box, but not the oranges. But you need to tell, okay, first look through all of the items and check to see if the item is an apple. If it's an apple, then throw it in the box and then call this box the filter. This is the filtered box. So only run the loop on the filtered box, basically. And that's the introduction to the Python looping and establishing a basic filter and running settings on all of your scenes. I find this is, hopefully it's not too complex and that you get your feet wet and that you learn. Don't be afraid of using machine learned data or statistical models to help you learn some Python nice and easily. It gives you an explanation, it gives you an example, it gives you a conversation when it works, and life is getting easier and easier, which is great because that means we can be more creative and free to do what we really want to do, which is relate with other people. That's well, Killian, you mentioned how do I make you a mod inside of Twitch? I think I made you a mod. I think. No ban. There we go. Got some spam. Gone. Okay, so that's the first aspect of today. We're learning to use machine learning to help automate our process of using Python inside of Blender. And with that, we can use some basic Blender concepts of using a loop, using a parameter, and using the Blender data system to help us access data and change it. We can also do the same for like, if we load another script, here I have set the render path on all of my scenes. So in this case, just ignore the green parts, but basically I have the same thing here, the filter, and I run the filter, and in the filter, I set the file path to the particular whatever I want with the string name. So I can select the loop name of the scene and I can use the name and set the subpaths of that particular shot. So if I run this on all of my shots, I already automatically set the paths so that when I render each shot, it goes to a separate folder the way that it should be, just like it is here. So there are different use cases that you can use and the different file paths. So homework is study some strings, like how to manage strings and file paths inside of Blender and Python, and how to create a parameter inside of a bracket, and how to do a for loop, for in, and then you're good to go. Those are the 3 fundamentals you need to automate your render settings nice and quickly in a single click. And someone could make an add-on maybe, but who knows. So the next step in the process today, let me just take a moment to breathe, is how to do custom lighting per shot. Give me a moment. Thanks, Killen. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far about this? Would you like me to clarify something before I move on to the next topic?
I'm good.
Great. Okay. Though, with the little break, we actually have something that we can do here, which is Slink. You had a compositor setup, correct? Let's take a closer look. All right. So this tune compositing that you were working on, I saw you work on it earlier this week. Tell me about it. I assume it's in the compositor view.
It's just you basically take like a very random render. Yeah, it had like an HDRI. Yeah, I didn't pack it into file.
Okay.
Would be big though. Yeah, I used like the easy HDRI add-on. Just a few easy things there.
That add-on I do not know.
Easy HDRI is king. It's the best thing ever.
Cool. Alright, so this is the scene. Does this work in the real-time compositor or not?
No, currently it does not.
That's
because yeah, some parts should work, but most of the parts would not work because the real-time compositor does not support multipass rendering. So you can only really composite on the first pass, the image pass.
The RGB pass, yeah.
Yes. So
all
the other passes are ignored.
Okay, so let's hit render. Can't wait till it does become multipass. Now that would be amazing.
Yes.
I think the real-time compositor is only useful when we get multipass rendering. But till then, it's pretty much a gimmick. There we go. So let me just... I see, nice. I'll just make this full frame, edit onto low. There we go. Cool, it's looking good. Right, so show me, what are you doing? Yes, we need these nodes. The normalized, dilate and erode, difference, then greater than. Yes, this is where the magic's happening, correct?
Yes, this takes the Z-pass, depth pass, yes.
Which is...
I normalize it.
Like this? This is the Z depth?
Yes, so you can use it better.
Then you erode it?
Dilate, erode, I think dilate is
Dilate's
bigger and
the opposite.
erode smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, then I dilated it. Use difference to get like this halo outline effect.
Nice. And then use a greater than of a particular value.
Yes.
Cool. And then you mix it back in as a black line. Or you could use any color, right?
Yes. The colors very free, just black is the most common one.
Yep. And you did this 3 times.
Yes, with different passes. This is the shadow line, and this was the ambient occlusion line.
Great.
Basically, there's a line on the shadow.
I see it, which would be this green one. There we go. And then you had a detail line here.
Yes, where I use ambient occlusion.
Which is the inside here. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting, cool. And then we use this anti-aliasing node.
Yes, because nothing there is anti-aliased.
There you go, it's much higher quality there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool setup.
Yeah, I also use like...
The posterize node is to get the colors. Like the stepped colors, yeah.
Yes, but like anything in the environment just gets black. So I use the thing again separately with a way higher value. 70 or 120, depends on the HDRI or how bright it is.
So let's go to 32-bit. 32 colors, there we go.
Yeah, that's like...
Let's change the view. Hit render. I feel like I have too many samples at the moment.
Probably. There's not much going on in there.
Yeah, let me just double check. 512 for Eevee? What? You only need like 32 or 64. 128 if you want to be generous. Right. We hit render again. 3 seconds. We saved 5 times the time by dropping it down. There we go.
Yes. Yeah. I find the background looks kind of so yeah, I would bump up that again.
Of course. So let's go to 64 colors just for fun. Oh my god.
Yeah, that looks nicer.
Much better. 128.
Yes.
Now we're getting into 1995.
Yes.
256. This is the year 1997. Alright, cool.
Yes.
Okay, well done. Okay, I like it. It's interesting. It's a nice setup. I really can't wait till we get render buffers inside or AOVs from the real-time compositor, because that will make this super useful.
Yes, that would be like very sick.
It would be.
Then you don't need to make like material magic things.
Yeah. But
So
even
you just
then,
have thing.
yeah. Though if you do want your real-time lines, you could use your grease pencil modifiers.
Yeah, the line art modifier.
Because the posterize does work already, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
cool.
great. All right, so let's move on. Let's go on with the next segment of today. And let me just check my time to see if we actually have enough time. We've been here 45 minutes. Check the chat. Multipass. Killen asks, does the toon shader work inside of cycles? And can it be denoised?
Because it's all in the compositing, it should work.
Yeah, it should, yeah.
There, you probably would get like global illumination toon, which would be very interesting to see, not gonna lie.
Yeah, it would.
But yeah, it should be possible.
I agree, yeah. The only things that toon shading benefits from is from the shader to RGB node, which does not work inside cycles, but everything else does. So you could use different techniques, emission, whatever you need to get the job done. But the shader to RGB node is really what gives you the power of EV and MPR. And if you use the GUI engine, that's right. If you use the GUI engine, you get access to the render buffers inside of the shaders, and the incoming refraction is built in a very clean and a performant way. So even it's also, if you really want to be serious about MPR, you can use Molt 3D, which is a bare offshoot for Blender, specially designed for MPR. It does have real-time compositing compared to GUI engine, and it has.
GUI engine should have it when Blender has it.
Yeah, but you do get buffers inside of Molt. And Molt is also it's a lot older, less performant than Eevee, but it is very capable. And GUI engine gives you the render buffers that you need inside of shader to give you some interesting effects, which I wish I knew existed when I started my Painterly. Oh well. So let's take a look at a scene that I'm working on. So let's just give me a moment to load it up here. And we'll go on with the next segment. So thank you, Slink, for sharing this. Do you plan to put it up onto your Gumroad?
Yeah, I think I could do that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I am currently working on episode Song 5, Episode 4 of the Android Repair Shop. It is nearly done, hopefully by tomorrow. Here's a short preview or a teaser of the actual shot. Whoop. So this particular scene it's at night, and that means I have to work on the lighting of the characters to bring them out of the background with a lot of techniques. So every piece or every shot that I have of this particular character has to be set up artistically. So if we take a look at, whoops, give me a moment, at each, this particular scene, which I'm going to show you. There we go. So the first camera is this one. Then we move into the crowd. Then we move into the drone. Then we see her get off, and then get off the drone, and then she walks into the club. Walk off. So here is the first shot. Here's the second shot. Here's the third shot. And then we go into the third one, fourth one, where she's here. And the last one. I've already done the lighting work and I've rendered these shots to disk already, but as a work in progress, I'll show you this technique. So here's a problem. The first problem is I have a lot of blue light on the drone, but under the drone there is no light. I have a lot of red light or reddish light, purple, on the people with some yellow, and the background I want it nice and dark. In this particular shot, I want the background still nice and dark in the street, but the drone and the light to shine out, but more yellowish, to bring in the more vibe coming in from the people. And then here, I want the light shining on her, and I want this rim light coming in from the doorway of the drone, and the yellow light on her shoulder and her hair coming in, because I want to light her up in a particular way where she stands out from the detailed background. And then from there, I want to relight her shoulder and her arms and her hair and everything, and silhouette her from the door frame of this particular frame here. So you can see that even though this is one scene, one particular setup, but I have 5 different cameras, and each camera needs its own particular lighting before I hit render. So how do I do this? How do I work in this particular setup? So this is what I call a continual sequence of camera cuts in one particular shot. This is where I become granular. So I won't save. Let me just load up that scene. Sorry, go from recents. Boom, boom, boom. Layout number 2. This is going to take a while to load. But basically what I need to do, if we go and take a look at my notes. When you're working with, back here, when you're working with a scene, sometimes what you want is, with this particular scene, you may have a number of different elements. For example, you have the set, you have the characters, you have the props, and you have the lights. And they all go inside of the scene. And with this particular scene, you may have multiple cameras. So you chop it up into pieces around here, and you could have camera 1, camera A, camera B, C, and D of this particular shot. So this could be shot number, in this case, I think this was shot 3. So we have camera A, B, C, D, and there was a 4th shot. And in this particular case, to save time, I wanted to render everything in one go. I didn't want to do cuts. I didn't want to use multiple scenes. I just wanted to use the same scene and just render from start to finish, one frame sequence, frame 000 to frame 400 or something. So with that, I'll write to disk, and then I would use each particular individual shot later with my color balancing cut up from the render sequence. But just to save time in one script and everything, I just render the whole thing together and use my camera cuts directly for the animatic or from the animatic. But I need different lights for different shots. So let's take a look and see what we can do about the light. Whoop. So I have a lighting here. Oh, this pen I can't see. Red. So if I have lighting here, and here, and here, and here as well, all these different lights, the problem is, come on, why did it do that? The problem with this is that these lights need to be separated into different things. I have some global lights and I have some separated lights. So let's take a closer look. So everything is compiling and everything is good. And let's take a look at my scene settings. So here are my cameras, camera A, B, C, D, and E. And then if we take a look at my common stuff, I have common lights, the sky, the common part of the city, which is part of my linked collections from all my data. But after that, I have my current shot. And inside the shot, I have lighting from A, B, C, D, and E. But let's take a closer look. So in this particular shot here, if we have this shot with the lighting from camera A, it's not going to affect anything. If we have the lighting from camera B, it's the wrong lights. If we have the camera from C, we got better lights, but is it the correct lighting? Or camera D, which is the actual camera we want, or camera E. So you can see that I'm using different types of lights or different types of shots set up inside of collections, and I can isolate these collections. So what happens if I want to animate? The problem with Blender is if I want to animate visibility, I could do it the long way, which is using view layers, and then I can assign the light collections by the view layers. Or I can use a separate scene with a separate view collection views and use that. Or I can use all my lighting and I can put them inside as instances, and I can animate the visibility of the collections through instances. So this is what I did. Instead of using view layers, which is a little bit clunky, and instead of using scenes, which can also be a little bit clunky, though it's good for render settings, but if I want to keep it all in the same scene, I can change my lights per camera, which is in the timeline here. So if we take a closer look, I have camera binds to A, B, C, D, and E on the same timeline and the same scene, and I can show and hide collection instances, because instances are collections, but you can actually animate their visibility. So with that, I've animated the visibility from the frame that the camera starts to the frame that the camera ends, so that I have different lighting show up per shot. There we go. Still compiling shaders. 27 remaining. It's probably because I'm streaming. So this is a technique that I find if you don't have the option that I've taught you before of using view layers, and you don't want to like configure the view layers and animate them inside the compositor and render settings and all that, and you don't want to split up your scene into multiple scenes, your shot, sorry, into multiple scenes, and you're animating your cameras on the timeline with the binding, then instance your lighting per shot and animate the visibility. And with that, I just deactivated the collections and I show the animated the visibility of the lights per shot. There we go. So the lighting is now correctly assigned to the actual camera cut with the keyframes, and you can see that these keyframes are all working correctly. So that was the small tip that I wanted to share with you, and this was basically everything that we had talked about today. So just to give you a quick summary for those who have arrived later or may watch this later. Give me a second as everything is still, it's running, waiting and thinking. Why did it freeze? There we go, got it. So, to quick summary of today, we had a look at an introduction of using automation with Python so that we could get the data from the scenes, set the data using a loop in the data that exists with a loop operator. And then we had a look at how to get the settings of your render and set them inside the script using copy and paste from the info editor. Then we had a look at running the script inside of the console editor to see using print as like a feedback thing where you use quotation marks for strings. And we also had a look at creating a filter of your scene names using a for in the data inside these brackets and using an if conditional to help filter the name of the scene so that we don't run the loop on everything. We just run the loop on the scenes that we want. We had a quick look at the reason why we should automate, because some things get repetitive and really boring. So using a little bit of code or using some assistance, we can figure it out. We had a quick look at finding machine learning chatbots, for example, ChatGPT by OpenAI to help you learn Python very quickly and have a conversation to learn how the code works and get some quick examples when it works. And we had a look at also how to set up a concurrent camera cut scene with different lighting using instance collections and animating the visibility of collections. And another quick bonus is this concept of animating collection visibility without using scenes or view layers can be useful for anything, including motion graphics, visibility of characters, and any other thing. If you learn to use animation on instances, it can help you optimize your scenes and your work. So, and also we had a quick conversation that B4Artist 3.4 is coming out, depending on when I get it uploaded, and Blender 3.4 was released. And thank you for connecting today. And also there were some other tips about NPR, and we had a nice look at a composited thing by Slink also. So Killen, thanks for joining. And Slink and Marty and Decap as well. Nice to have you here. I'm glad it was good. So I'll be here, same time, same place next week. Hopefully I can get some publicity and the topic sooner than later this time. I'm promising myself. I'll talk to you later, Killen. Thanks for joining. And we'll bid farewell. So long.